organized crime syndicate. For those unfamiliar, the Yakuza is a criminal organization that dates back to the 17th century. They are known for their involvement in extortion, blackmail, drug trafficking, prostitution, gambling, and a host of other illegal activities. Their reach is long and their reputation is terrifying. With ties to an organization like the Yakuza, it's no wonder that Hiroshi was feared by many at school. Many students kept their distance, intimidated by the power and violence that seemed to follow him wherever he went. But Junko, despite her reputation for kindness and politeness, was different. One day, Hiroshi approached her, asking her out, and when she politely but firmly turned him down, many were left in shock. No one told Hiroshi no. He wasn't used to it, and certainly not from someone like Junko, someone who had everything to lose and nothing to gain from getting on the wrong side of someone like him. Yet, Junko remained gracious, always sweet and respectful, but her decision was final. For Hiroshi, this moment would plant the seed for something darker, a moment of rejection that would slowly twist into something much more sinister. The abduction of Junko. It all began on November 25th, 1988. That day, Junko was riding her bike home from her part-time job when she came across Hiroshi and his friends, Shinji and Minato. Hiroshi had ordered Shinji to kick Junko off her bike, and then he would pretend to rescue her. This was his way of trying to impress her so that maybe she would change her mind about him. Of course, she wouldn't. After Junko was knocked to the ground, Hiroshi helped her up and offered to escort her home and keep her safe. Of course, Hiroshi had no intent of helping her at all, and he certainly wasn't going to walk her home. He tricked her as they walked together, luring her into an abandoned warehouse. There, he essayed Junko, threatening to kill her if she screamed for help. This would just be the beginning of the absolute hell that Junko had to endure. Hiroshi had no intention of letting Junko go, even if she complied with his demands. When he was finished awing her at the warehouse, he dragged her to a hotel and continued to repeatedly force himself upon her. He was so excited about his conquest, patting himself on the back, that he had to call his friends to come and see. He called Shinji Minato, the boy who had kicked Junko off her bike, and his other friends. I think it's Yo Agura and Yasushi Watanabe. At this point, his friends wanted to join in on the R. They had all previously participated in the gang R of a different girl one time before. That girl was lucky enough to be let go once they were finished, but Junko would not be. Around 3 a.m., Hiroshi took Junko to a nearby park with his friends. You might think this could be her opportunity to escape. However, they had found her home address from a notebook in her backpack and told her that they knew where she lived and that the Yakuza members would kill her family if she attempted to escape. The boys decided to keep her held hostage so that they could continue to abuse her, but they Hiroshi's Yakuza affiliation and said that they were worried about retaliation for getting involved. They were also afraid of their own son, Shinji, who is known to be extremely violent towards them. So this poor girl continued to be held captive, hard, and tortured in the most brutal of ways, and they did absolutely nothing to help her. Even as they heard her screams and cries coming from the room she was held captive in, they ignored it. I'm going to go through a list of just some of the things that were done to Junko, and this is a trigger warning. Disturbing content ahead. I'm not going to read this. Okay, I skipped most of it, but I'll continue here. At one point, when she was about 20 days into her kidnapping, halfway through the whole ordeal, the attackers were resting after drinking a little bit too much, so she tried to call the police. Unfortunately, she was caught and punished by having her feet set on fire by burning lighter fluid, and they burned her eyelids with hot wax and lighters. This would be the first of 2 phone calls made to the police. One of the friends of the boys who had participated in one of Junko's SAs suddenly developed a conscience and decided that he felt guilty. He would allege that he was bullied into participating in the R. He never wanted to do it, and he felt so guilty. And he felt guilty, so he told his parents. As a result, they sent the police out to Shinji's house to investigate. When the officers arrived at the home where Junko was being held captive and tortured, they first spoke to Shinji's parents, who owned the house. These parents decided to lie and cover for the boys, telling officers that there wasn't any girl being held captive in their home. They also invited the police inside to have a look for themselves if they wanted to, which completely threw the authorities off guard. So the officers assumed that all must be well. They thought, if there truly was a girl being held against her will, surely these parents wouldn't invite them in, right? The police declined the investigation and left without checking the house. This poor girl was absolutely fighting for her life at this point, enduring things that I can't imagine anyone surviving. If the parents were afraid to go to the police themselves for fear of retribution, one might be able to somewhat understand. However, they were given the opportunity to say something to the police who were already at their door, and they didn't. They kept their mouths shut. I have to hope that they invited the police in because they really wanted them in there to see what was happening for themselves. But unfortunately for Junko, this wasn't to be. Had the police searched the house and actually gone in and located Junko, she may have well recovered from her injuries. The 2 police officers who went to the door were later fired for failing to follow procedures. On the 44th day, the final day of Junko's life, the boys challenged Junko to a game of Mahjong. This is a popular card game of skill, strategy, and calculation, and it involves a degree of chance. It's very popular in Asian countries. Junko won the game. Now I have no idea how she was in any state to participate in such a card game, let alone win the game, but she did. Junko was strong. She was a fighter. Of course, Junko winning made them angry, so they treated her to a beating with an iron barbell and fire by setting her legs, arms, face, and stomach alight. After tragedy here isn't just what happened to Junko, it's what happened after. Despite the gruesome, horrific nature of the crime, even though Hiroshi and his friends were responsible for something that should have kept them behind bars for the rest of their lives, the judicial system failed her. The 4 boys who had taken part in this unimaginable act received sentences that will make you sick to your stomach. I'm no expert in the judicial system in Japan, but I do know this. Things like this have happened before in North America too, and it feels like a loophole in the law that lets the most heinous criminals slip through. These boys, these men, had committed an unspeakable crime, but because they were all underage at the time of the murder, the law treated them with leniency. The severity of their actions were ignored, overshadowed by the technicalities of their youth. Hiroshi, the self-proclaimed ringleader, was sentenced to a mere 20 years in prison, and after serving his time, he was released in his late 30s, able to start over, to live a new life, free from the shadow of the horrors he'd caused. And the other 3 boys, their sentences were even lighter. They served just 7 years in prison. 7 years. When they were released, they were granted new protected identities, essentially given the opportunity to wipe the slate clean and live anonymous, peaceful lives. They could get married, have children, and live happily, things that Junko would never have the chance to experience. While they were free to move on, to create families and live their lives, Junko's future was stolen from her. The world kept turning while she would never again walk its streets. She would never get the chance to live the life she deserved. And the real tragedy, the system that allowed this to happen, that let these boys slip away with little more than a slap on the wrist, still raises questions to this day. How is it that someone like Junko, who had done nothing wrong, paid with her life while her killers were granted freedom so easily? And unbelievably, it gets sadder. The wounds caused by Junko's death didn't just run deep for her family, they spread outwards, infecting every corner of this tragedy. Hiroshi's mother did not see Junko as the victim. Instead, she blamed Junko. She could not, or perhaps would not, comprehend that her son's actions were the cause of the pain, the suffering, the loss. In her mind, Hiroshi was a victim too, a boy who had simply made a mistake. Junko, however, was not the innocent girl she should have been. No, she was the one at fault in her eyes. To make matters even worse, Hiroshi's mother took her blame to an unimaginable extreme. She desecrated Junko's grave, spitting on it, dishonoring the place where she had been laid to rest. But the tragedy didn't end there. Hiroshi's parents were ordered to pay restitution to Junko's family, $425,000, an amount that could never replace the life of a child, but at least one would think it would offer some sense of justice, some small sliver of compensation for the unspeakable pain they had endured. But what did Hiroshi's parents do with that money? They didn't give it to Junko's grieving family. Instead, they sold their house and handed that money directly to the other 3 boys who had been released after serving only 7 years in prison. Junko's parents, who had lost everything, received nothing. The money that should have gone to them never made it into their hands. As a result, Junko's mother, shattered by the loss and the injustice, eventually found herself in a mental institution. I can't imagine the depth of that pain, to lose your daughter in such a brutal, senseless way, and then to have the system and the world turn a blind eye to your suffering. I can understand how a mother faced with such torment could find no escape but to retreat punishment for these men who made her suffer. I said this last time I filmed a true crime video. I said I don't know if I was gonna do one again, and this is why, because I just get nauseous and enraged. But I also think that there is a power to this. It's important to remember the victims, to never forget to honor them. And so I kind of push myself because I need to hear her story. But my heart aches for her and her family, and yeah, that's pretty much it. If you guys want to read the full story with all the information, I will put it, I will link it down below. And I'll end the video the way that I ended my other true crime videos, which is that I truly hope that these perpetrators brought in hell. I hope they have miserable lives. And I hope they have very painful deaths. So, yeah. I feel like we all need